Welcome back to the Select Committee on Victoria Planning Provision Amendments, VC257, VC267 and VC274. I'd like to welcome our witnesses and we'll get those introduced shortly. Before we do that, however, can I just advise you, please, that all evidence taken today is protected by parliamentary privilege as provided by the Constitution Act of 1975 and the provisions of the Legislative Council standing orders. Therefore, the information you provide during the hearing is protected by law. You are protected against any action for what you say during this hearing, but if you go elsewhere and say the same thing, these comments may not be protected by privilege. Any deliberately false or misleading statements to the committee may be considered a contempt of Parliament. All evidence is being recorded and you will be provided with a proof version of the transcript following the hearing. Transcripts will ultimately be made public and posted on the committee's website. For the Hansard record, can we please state your name and any organisation you're appearing on behalf of, and we'll start at this end of the table if I may.
No worries. Oscar Stanley from ABN Group.
Ashley Williams from Evolve Development.
Linda Allison, Urban Development Institute of Australia, Victoria.
Keith Ryan from the Housing Industry Association.
Kath Evans, Property Council of Australia, Victorian Division.
Michael Meyer, Urbis.
Andrea Towson, Gaydens.
And can I just say at the outset, on behalf of the committee, thank you for appearing today, and also we're very conscious that this was on very tight timeframes, so we really do appreciate you making the time to join us today. I believe you're going to open up with a statement, so we'll do that, and then we'll throw it open for questions after that. So thank you very much, and I believe the statement's been distributed as well to all of the committee members.
Right.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. And on behalf of everyone, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land that we meet and pay our respects to elders past and present. It's fairly unusual that the three industry organisations do issue a joint statement, but I think it's a testament to the strength of the importance of the issue that we're covering today, and also that we do have a lot of common ground in terms of our respective positions on the proposed planning amendments. So I'll just read out the statement, and really after that I'm in your hands, Chair, in terms of the questions and discussion after that. So the Urban Development Institute of Australia, the Property Council of Australia and the Housing Industry Association welcomed the opportunity to provide a joint statement to the Legislative Council State Select Committee on the Victorian Planning Provision Amendments VC257, VC267 and VC274. The UDIA, Property Council and HIA on balance support the planning amendments. These amendments are as an essential step towards creating a more predictable, efficient and transparent planning system that can meet the housing needs of Victoria's growing population. It's important that these amendments are embedded over the longer term to ensure policy certainty in planning that encourages the level of investment required to meet the state's housing needs, especially given the broader challenges impacting the development and construction sectors. We emphasise the urgent need to increase housing supply and improve affordability across Victoria. The amendments will facilitate the development of diverse housing options, including the higher density housing in well-serviced locations, which is crucial for addressing the current housing shortfall and ensuring that more Victorians have access to affordable homes. The introduction of streamlined approval processes, such as the deemed to comply standards and the fast-track permit pathways, will significantly reduce delays and provide greater certainty for developers. These measures will help expedite the delivery of new housing projects, reduce holding costs and encourage investment in the property sector. We support the focus on developing activity centres and promoting transit-oriented development through the built-form overlay in activity centres and the housing choice and transport zone in residential areas around activity centres. These tools will enable higher density development in strategic locations, leveraging existing infrastructure and services to create vibrant, well-connected communities. We support the introduction of new townhouse and low-rise apartment code under the amendment VC267. This code is a significant enhancement for future housing delivery as it promotes quality, protects livability and makes more efficient use of underutilised land. By reducing red tape for median density typologies such as townhouses and low-rise apartments in well-located areas, the Code supports increasing housing choices and improving affordability. We acknowledge the importance of community engagement and public consultation in the planning process. Clear communication of the benefits of planning reforms and involving local stakeholders will be crucial for gaining community support and ensuring the successful implementation of the amendments. In conclusion, the UDIA, Property Council and HIA urge the committee to enable the successful implementation of the planning amendments VC257, VC267 and VC274. These reforms are vital for addressing the housing crisis, improving the planning system and creating a more prosperous and livable Victoria. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you so much. Okay, we'll start doing some questions now, and I'll open the batting. You say at the beginning of the statement here, on balance, you support the amendments. Could you perhaps identify for us things that perhaps you don't support or you have concerns about arising from the amendments?
I think we would like to say that it's not a question of whether we support or don't support elements of it. I think that there will be considerations for implementation and for monitoring. So in terms of issues that we might look to, for example, in VC267 in the townhouse context, we'd be saying that and this is in our submission, that maintaining council compliance with the code intent, making sure that the code is promoted, for example, and the spirit of the reform is actually adhered to and not attempted to be circumvented. And so one workaround for that, for example, would be some tied codes attached to that. So that's one of the areas going forward. We did touch on community engagement, and certainly for these changes we see community engagement as an important element for government to implement effectively. I should allow my colleagues to also have the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Look, yes, on balance, look, these reforms are part of a journey, to be frank. We are going to be seeing more reforms of the planning system over time, and what's before this committee and what will continue to be put up as proposals, be it in the form of planning amendments or other regulatory instruments, will evolve. Yes, there are things that we could argue could be improved, there could be greater clarity, and we will also need to see these instruments tested. An important perspective from HIA's view is government will make planning instruments, Parliament will make laws. Ultimately, though, industry, consumers and the public make decisions about how to actually apply those and make things happen. And there will be testing of the instruments, and over time there will need to be refinements as we learn from experience. So no legislative instrument is perfect. Some are less perfect than others. There's one tomorrow I'll be looking at which is very different and much less perfect. But on the balance, this is a step forward. It gives positive hope to the industry and to the community that there is scope for improving the variety of housing stock. It's not about building high-rise towers everywhere. It's about giving more options, more flexibility and more opportunities for homes to be built.
Thank you.
Broadly, I agree with the comments of my colleagues. The areas that are light on at the moment, which we will be seeking further information as these plans are further developed, are around detail about non-housing growth required within each activity centre, longer-term social and community infrastructure requirements, including catering for increased vehicle and pedestrian traffic, local employment opportunities through commercial and retail development. So the 10 pilot plans at this stage are sort of light on around those issues, and we'd welcome further insights as these plans are developed.
Oh, thank you. There's obviously multiple references there to this question of the journey and the potential for improvement and the need to monitor the rollout. The Auditor-General has expressed interest in this question twice now, in 2008 and 2017, and recommended the adoption of a monitoring, consultation, continuous improvement process. Do you have a position on those two recommendations from the Auditor-General? Or does that sound like a good idea to have that sort of an improvement framework?
I think if I may start, in principle it sounds fine, but it seems a bit strange to be talking about it when I'm here in a parliamentary committee where you have the political process being used to review instruments and to review legislation. It may be some value, and look, I'm not fully familiar with the details of the recommendations, so I can't say too much, but I don't think we should be underrating the importance of the political process as well. So it may just add an extra layer of discussion and consultation above what's already there. So I think it's maybe, in first glance, it sounds reasonable, but it might just add a lot more delaying, a lot more confusion, and as it is, and this is somewhat, I don't want to be disrespectful to the planning industry, but at times it seems it's more about having more chances to say no than to say yes. And I just fear that would add to that mix.
I think if I may add too, that I think in the discussions around these particular amendments and broader housing policy, the question is, what is the ultimate problem that we're solving for here? And the ultimate problem is that we have a housing crisis. So when we talk about on balance, do we support these? We say yes, on balance we do, because while we may not have planning amendment perfection here, our priority is actually to deliver more homes across Victoria so that people can live in the types of homes they want to live in the places that they want to live. And at the moment, there is a huge disconnect between what people can afford, the types of areas that they want to live in, and what industry is actually able to deliver. So at the moment, we say we are in the middle of the crisis. I'm yet to meet anybody who disagrees with that, and that we need to be putting in measures to make it as easy to deliver homes for Victorians, rather than creating more red tape or obstacles in the way to that process.
Did you have a comment on the
the
Auditor
industry
General's report?
needs first and foremost certainty about how they can deliver more homes. And what we have at the moment is a complex, inefficient planning system which does not provide that certain pathway for people to make investment decisions in this state. So these recommendations clearly provide certainty on a pathway through for developers to invest and know that they will have an outcome within a certain period of time. Those elements are critical, efficiency and certainty, and we believe that these amendments deliver on both fronts.
And may I just, from an industry perspective, as a builder, that certainty is absolutely at the core of our ability to take what we do affordably on greenfield areas of Melbourne and bring it into the more established middle ring suburbs. And to Kath's point, if there was a constant evolution of the design, uniform design, and that certainty, it becomes less and less feasible for us to play affordably. So, yeah, definitely support that.
Thank you. Mr Davis.
Chair, I just want to begin with Mr Meyer at Urbis. Is it a fact that Mr Shepherd has joined Urbis recently?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, and he did some work on the BFO-related matters on this, is that?
I understand he did. He was responsible for some work in relation
So
to
we've
the
got
activities.
two of you here from Urbis who are part of a consultancy that's been involved. Am I wrong on that, or?
Mr Shepherd did have a role in preparing the activities.
Do you think he should have declared a conflict of interest when he gave evidence earlier?
I didn't observe Mr Shepherd's evidence, so I can't speak.
Should he have, given he was involved in writing some of these
I don't
amendments?
believe so, because I believe he was...
Do you think he was able to come and give evidence and not tell us about his involvement?
Well, I'm not aware of what Mr Shepherd said this morning.
All right, well, we'll leave that there, thank you. Now, I've just looked at this 3 organisations, and there's one 3-letter word that doesn't appear on this, tax. Now, is it a decision by the 3 organisations to go soft on the government on tax? Is that, are you rolling over nicely for the government on tax? And I'm deadly serious.
Well, our previous statements, our individual statements,
I've seen
make
those.
very clear comments around the challenges in the sector at the moment in delivering housing due to the myriad of taxes and charges which burden the industry.
Is it
and
on
that
this
is
sheet?
very clear in our detailed statements.
It's not on this sheet, though.
Well, it's not on the sheet because we were specifically addressing the 3 planning amendment changes. Obviously, our...
It's in relation to the inquiry.
Yep.
That's right.
Good. Thank you.
Please continue.
And just to continue on a couple of these points, what I would also be interested to know, has there been any consultation with the Premier's office to either of the 3 organisations prior to this hearing? Have any of you spoken to the Premier's office?
Not the Premier's office on this matter, no.
Ms Evans?
In relation to this particular inquiry?
This particular matter, an inquiry? Please be very truthful under oath. The answer is yes, I think.
No, I'm trying to reflect on the phone calls that I have received, but whether they have been from the Premier's office or not.
Sorry, could I just maybe
Yeah.
I did, when the inquiry was first announced, get a phone call from the Premier's office telling me it was happening, and that was fine, and
Processes of Legislative Council.
which was, that was good to get the heads up that it was happening. And I then had a chat to one of your colleagues,
Yep.
Richard, and I expressed our concern that, no, we felt this was not a great inquiry, but we understood why they had chosen to go ahead. But that was the end of my discussions with the Premier's office, or for that matter with the Liberal Party.
So, Ms Evans,
So
just
my-
on reflection, you've had...
My recollection is of being notified by the Premier's office. I've not
Who
had a
did you talk to?
discussion.
You can come back to us with that.
I would have to
the
check my
details.
notes. I do have notes
Thank you.
of my
Just
conversations,
for-
and I would have to check them.
For clarification, my interaction has been the same as Keith. I was notified of the intention for the select committee to be established, but since
What
then
did they
I've...
ask you to do?
They wanted to make us aware of the potential
What did they ask you
outcome.
to do?
Potential outcome.
Well, they asked us to consider whether that was an outcome that we would support, and if
What did they ask you
sorry,
to do?
let me be clear. They notified me of the intention to establish a committee, what that process may entail, which was not previously familiar with, and if the potential delay of the introduction of these amendments would be something that the industry would be in favour of or not.
Were any drafts of the activity centre proposals shared with any of the 3 organisations?
Do you mean in the lead up
Lead
to?
up to,
I believe
the
there
gazettals.
Look, I'd need to take advice on that, but industry was consulted.
Ryan?
There was some consultation. To be frank, I was understaffed with planning people at the time, so it's possible something were advised of a process, but we didn't participate in any great extent. But I don't believe we were
Ms.
actively
Evans?
involved.
My recollection, and again, I would have to check my documentation, is that we were asked to provide formal feedback to the draft
Proposals.
activity centre plans, which we did, and we've shared that documentation with this committee.
All of the documentation you provided into the government.
We have, as it relates to these matters, yes. So the proposal we did on activity centres, we have provided. We also provided a written submission in relation to the townhouse code. We haven't annexed that to our submission
Can
today.
you
but
provide
happy
to us all
absolutely,
the material
happy
that
to.
you sent to government
Happy
on
to.
these matters? That would be helpful. It's important because I think many in the community were not consulted, and industry appears to have been more heavily consulted than the local communities. And I ask you further, the 3 of you, did any large corporate members who benefit from government incentives on build to rent have any input into the organisation's position on activity centres?
No.
Ms Evans?
The Division Council of the Property Council, which is akin to the board of the Property Council, does have several members. So local board, it's called the Division Council. It does have several members who have build to rent assets. Our usual process is to provide our Division Council with a copy of submissions that we are providing to government for any formal
Did
processes.
they help framing with the submissions?
For their consideration.
For framing the submissions? Help with that?
So those documents, as of a usual process are provided to them for their feedback and commentary.
So they're
Okay, we're
provided,
gonna
we
leave it
we
there.
might
We'll-
have a copy of those too, please.
So the submission on
Okay.
activity centres has already been provided to you.
No,
Right, we'll have time to come back.
Given
A
us
few more
the
questions. Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much all for coming in today. We've heard evidence earlier today, and I think also in some of the contributions you've made about the importance of the impact that uncertainty has on the industry, on the housing industry, on the development industry, and the challenges that delays have in terms of cost and escalation. One of the things we're grappling with as a committee is that the Legislative Council has before it a motion to revoke 2 of the 3 planning scheme amendments that are subject today, 257 and 267, which will be considered, which have the potential to be considered by the Parliament at its next sitting after this report is tabled. We had evidence given to us at our last hearing that such a revocation would probably be one of the single largest revocations of planning scheme amendments ever in Victoria. Given the importance that certainty and the detriment that uncertainty has in terms of the housing industry and the development and the building of new housing, what impact do you think that a whole-scale revocation of planning schemes in this state would have on the prospect of getting more homes built for more Victorians?
Well, I think we just continue to call it the missing middle from a builder's perspective. It'll continue to not contribute to the crisis. We are inundated with demand for people looking to build houses in these suburbs, and we explain the process they need to go through, and we call them developers, but they're mum and dad investors, they're retirees, they're people that, you know, the nan's passed away and they want to build 2 townhouses on the family block. So as soon as you talk about VCAT, interest, costs, the potential that the design that we're designing has to be changed 4 times, these people aren't developers, they're not comfortable with development risk, so they don't end up building. And I think that's the opportunity here is if we can go, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is going to cost this much, we'll have you on site in 6 months, you know, let's go and pick some colour schemes, then they would proceed. Because I think we talk about developers, but actually when you look at it, they're Melburnians just looking to build houses for different reasons. So for us, we do about 100 per annum in Greenfield, middle ring suburbs. We could see that, you know, escalating over time due to the demand we already see, and unfortunately don't proceed because of the complexity of the system.
Yeah. Look, that's the feedback we get from members regularly who are looking at getting involved in particularly the smaller multi-unit space, and that's why we are so concerned about the prospect, particularly of the townhouse code, but also the other amendments in having them revoked. This is a great opportunity for an industry that's currently on its knees. Our members are really struggling to get sales. Consumer confidence is low. There's a number of reasons for that, but one of it is the
Tax.
uncertainty. Look, tax is very much a matter, yes. In fact, I've got this for you later. And tax is a critical problem, and let's not shy from that. But so is planning, so are other parts of the building system. There's another bill going before Parliament in a couple of weeks in the Council, which in my view is pretty catastrophic for the impact on home builders' business certainty. And we're going to fight about that one. But we're also here supporting this amendment because we see these amendments as helping, providing some confidence, some hope, not just to builders but also to consumers, that there can be a way forward to get more affordable homes, get greater options. Townhouses are much more preferable to many members of our community than other forms of housing that could be imposed upon them. They should be given the chance to have that home built for them. And so we would see any attempt to revoke, particularly the townhouse code, but also the other amendments, as being a negative and providing yet another sign that Victoria is not really open for business when it comes to getting homes built.
One of the other options, there's a wholesale revocation option, which is the one that's currently before the Parliament. There's also the potential for that to be amended to do some more targeted revocations of parts of the planning scheme amendments. From your perspective as people who look at trying to understand the rules before you make decisions. What are the consequences of sort of picking the eyes out of some parts of the system?
Right, look, it's that's simple. Look, as has already been pointed out, when you're running a business, you don't have the luxury of waiting for a process to drag through. You have to make calls about where do you invest your capital, where do you spend your time and effort, and consumers have the same choice. Do they even begin to dream that they might be able to get their block of land subdivided, maybe get a second home, maybe a townhouse can be built? Now, those options are being turned off because of the great uncertainty. And if these amendments become part of and I'll use this term deliberately, become part of a political football, then it's not really great for the community. It might be nice for some, but quite frankly, our members and the community deserve some certainty and not being forced to wait.
And the consequences of that uncertainty, you think would be delays in further house construction, but do you think it would also be cost escalation through...
Well, it's
greater
delays,
risk and
so
delay?
if I may, it's delays in even starting to think about it, because construction is really only part of the story. It's getting the approvals or getting the ability to get the project started and then starting to construct. You don't even get past that first base at the moment with a lot of projects. So what's being proposed here would, if you do revoke or even partially revoke and then drag it through a long drawn-out process, realistically for most people, and I can tell you from my member experience, most members, as soon as they know it's going through a political process, will switch off because they just know there's no point thinking about it, they might as well wait until it's all over. So any sort of decision to partly revoke is essentially a decision to put it on hold and make everyone wait.
Thanks, Chair.
After 11 years.
Ms Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your submissions and for appearing today. You may be aware that this inquiry so far has heard some criticism about different parts of some of these amendments or concerns raised, particularly around VC267. Now, putting aside how it might be achieved, what are your thoughts on amending or adjusting that based on some of those concerns that have arisen, particularly around the exemptions to clause 65 and parts of 60, and a number of the issues around ESD requirements and how that's going to affect some councils who have higher ESD or previously had higher ESD requirements. Tree canopy, vegetation, you may have heard some of those criticisms.
Yes.
So, what are your views on potentially adjusting some of those things within VC267?
I'll hand you to my
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify the matters. There was ESD...
ESD, vegetation and tree canopy, and also there's quite an extensive list of exemptions, clause 65.
So from the decision guidelines that
Yes.
typically apply. I'll talk to that last matter first. So the decision guidelines were one of the creations of great uncertainty during the application process, because as part of those decision guidelines, any other relevant matter was able to be considered. And as part of the planning application process in a townhouse application, that did create a great degree of uncertainty for any applicant, because matters that were not even specifically within the planning scheme were able to form part of the consideration of an application. So the use of the decision guidelines did create a degree of uncertainty and it allowed for the application of localised provisions that hadn't gone through the tests of a planning scheme amendment to be applied to a planning application. Examples of that will be localised flooding, which will be applicable during the building phase. So those matters will still be considered appropriately during the building permit phase, but they were unknown to the public and they often didn't have the correct planning scheme instruments implemented, which created a great degree of uncertainty and frustration in the system for many applicants. Just to turn to the ESD query that you've raised, I think that it's my view from the matters that have been included in the Townhouse and Low-Rise Code, it has sought to standardise and make those matters objective, given that it provides a number of very clear outcomes that need to be achieved in order to be considered to comply with that provision. That doesn't mean applicants can't proceed beyond that level. However, it provides a very clear level of compliance to meet what will be the benchmark. It also relies very heavily on the NCC with a 7-star minimum energy rating for a building, which does incorporate a number of the things that the previous ESD standards would have required in a townhouse style application, that being matters to do with obviously the energy efficiency of the dwelling. Other ESD matters that may not be picked up commonly, given they don't fall under the heading of sustainability, many of the livability standards which have been brought across from the Better Apartment Design Standards do enhance the overall sustainability of a dwelling. So these provisions in the Townhouse and Low-Rise Code bring in things that have never been evident as part of a townhouse development before. There's now considerations for relevant cross-ventilation being required. There's greater consideration for room depth to ensure daylight is able to penetrate into the main living areas and the main habitable rooms of a dwelling. So the ESD provisions have sought to be implemented in a understandable and objective manner in these provisions, because, as you noted, some councils had different standards that they required, which were implemented through local policies, but that did create a great degree of uncertainty across the state, depending on which council a proposal was made within. So providing that standardisation does give the ability for there to be some certainty in what would be expected.
Were any of you, were you aware of these, for example, that list of exemptions, like the Clause 65 and Clause 6 and Clause 60 exemptions prior to their gazettal? Was that something you'd provided feedback on? You said, you're supportive of that because it provides greater certainty, but were you aware of those before they were gazetted?
I'd have to take that on notice. Yep.
Okay. Was that something that were they, I guess as part, you said you had provided feedback to the government about some of these changes, so were they things you'd sought to have included in something like this townhouse code?
I would have to check the series of events. My recollection is that we received the draft planning scheme amendments, as did the rest of the community, and provided feedback.
Yes, they
as
did.
in the
Councils didn't.
We didn't get the drafts.
right.
They're not released to the community.
Yeah, so part of the reason for asking that question is my understanding is that councils and many in the planning sector hadn't seen those parts of these planning scheme amendments until after their gazettal. So just curious as to whether you had any...
I don't know what the overall distribution was,
No.
so
Okay.
that is not something I'm aware of.
That's okay.
Sitting here now.
Yeah, you were privy to more than most.
Just wanted to turn to affordability. Now, this is something we've had a few discussions about. In the Property Council submission, there was a reference to the need for other measures to actually deliver affordable housing. Don't say exactly what some of that might be, but I guess I'm curious to understand whether these planning changes in themselves will deliver more affordable housing and what more you think needs to be done, particularly for those really low and very low income households.
I can make some comments about that, but I would also like our representative here from the development community, who has first-hand experience of bringing product to market, to make some comments around that as well. But certainly we have been very vocal in the public domain about the challenges with housing delivery at the moment in the current economic climate. So every single commentator, both nationally and at a state level, have talked about the increasing cost of capital, the rapid escalation in construction costs which have occurred over the past couple of years, which has been unprecedented, combined with an increased tax burden, particularly in Victoria over the past decade, for property taxes, which have continued to escalate and have put downward pressure on the ability to deliver housing stock. So what we've seen is input costs escalating, and input costs include cost of capital, cost of construction, materials, labour, and the tax burden, taxes and charges, which are across the sector. I have got some detailed work here for the committee which sets out the increases in taxes over the past decade, both by way of new taxes for the industry and successive increases in existing taxes. So this burden has made the delivery of affordable housing extremely challenging and in many instances non-existent because profitability can't be delivered from investing in these products when you look at the cost combined with other input costs, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. The ABS data for the December quarter was our worst quarter since 2023. We built 1,346 less homes in the December quarter, and we're very worried, of course, about this trend. So whilst we see the amendments to the planning scheme as being very important for the long-term delivery of housing supply, we don't see them as being effective in the near term without further policy areas being attacked to try and improve the viability of construction. And I might defer to my colleague here.
Kath, yeah, I will just, I guess, reinforce what Kath has said, is that these amendments by themselves don't really shift the dial on affordability. Affordability is only going to improve if there is a significant increase in the supply of products, whether that be sites or apartments or townhouses, coming through the system with appropriate planning approvals. And then in the context of the environment, the economic conditions at that time, whether the feasibilities then allow for those projects to go ahead. And as Kath said, in the current economic conditions, these changes by themselves won't make a difference. It's a suite of changes that are required, and it goes to taxation, it goes to consumer confidence, it goes to selection of sites, it goes to, in some detail, the conditions that apply to these amendments. A lot of those issues haven't really been understood because the industry is sort of waiting to see what the outcome of this process is.
If I could, add one point to that. I think though it's important to stress that the planning reforms, they don't by themselves obviously fix the problem, but at least if we do get other fixes coming through, tax reform, better regulation of the building industry, greater certainty about availability of domestic building insurance, they are a springboard to hopefully getting new homes started in the future. So whilst in isolation they don't fix the problem, if the problem is being fixed, they become an opportunity for more homes to get built. And so that's why they are still important. They may not be the magic solution in isolation, but they are part of a package which will hopefully lead to improved conditions for the home building industry and more affordable housing and better consumer outcomes.
And certainly there's been multiple reviews that point to the cost of red tape in the planning system, the most recent being the Productivity Commission's report on the impact of planning of productivity in the construction sector, and they named planning red tape as one of the hindrances there.
Ms. Crozier.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you all for being before the committee this afternoon. In September of 2023, in a media release from the then Premier, Affordability Partnership to build 800,000 Victorian homes, there is, it says that the Labor government today signed the Affordability Partnership alongside the Property Council of Australia, Master Builders Victoria, the Urban Development Institute of Australia, the Housing Industry Association and Super Housing Partnerships. So were you all there alongside the Premier when that was signed, or just some of you? Yeah?
Yes, I was there.
We will all.
So given that statement of building 800,000 homes, and given your input from your submissions, you talk about the property taxes, Ms Evans, that have been increasing and adding to the burden of being able to build homes in Victoria. When did you start this conversation with government about that statement, is my first question. And when did you raise what you've just raised with the committee about the taxation, knowing that 800,000 homes is a huge demand, and you said that these taxes have been a problem for a decade. We're over 18 months on and you're still talking about it. So I've got a number of questions. So I'm just wondering if you could provide to the committee some insight into those discussions with government that you had about your concerns.
So, the Property Council's communication about the tax burden for the industry has been in the public domain for a considerable period of time. So I couldn't tell you precisely the date on which those discussions started to occur, but you could easily search media releases from the Property Council and see a long-standing discussion about the tax burden on the industry.
So why did you sign off and agree to building 800,000 homes when you know it could never be achieved then?
Being part of a conversation to assist Victorians in realising their dreams of home ownership is critically important.
Yep.
This is not a conversation we can have in isolation.
But that
without
figure's misleading,
engaging.
isn't it? That figure was misleading by the government, wasn't it?
With respect, the number was set by the government.
But didn't you push back on that?
Set by the sector.
But you all signed off with it. You all stood there with the Premier. You all signed off with it, saying, yes, we can build these 800,000 homes, knowing that there was taxation concerns, a whole lot of burdens. Why did you agree, standing there with government, when you know it could never be delivered?
These targets, and I can't speak on behalf of my colleagues here, are clearly important to meet the needs of our growing community. The industry has the expertise and capability to deliver. The program of work around being part of this partnership is to reveal and discuss the extent of the challenges that are in the sector, and with the intention of mobilising government to help meet those targets.
So given the reality of what we're faced with, given that we're over 18 months since you stood with government and signed off to these targets, what is the reality? What do you think is the true figure of homes that can be built? What is a revised target that you think is realistic now, given that you've highlighted all these concerns and barriers?
I don't think you can really set a target. Look, the target was
you're
always...
still with the government. You signed off on it.
Sorry, may I finish? Look, a target was there as an acknowledgement of the need to increase housing supply. There was a clear view from most industry associations, I believe, and certainly from HIA, that before then the Victorian government wasn't necessarily accepting that housing supply was a big problem. They, by setting a target, were doing so. They were acknowledging that they needed to increase supply. Yes, of course, we knew it was ambitious. We know that traditionally Victoria has so far managed to get to 71,000 homes in 1 year.
Once.
And that was a good outcome. And possibly if we grow...
Did the government mislead the Victorian public by setting such an ambitious target?
An unrealistic target.
Unrealistic target?
Well, I'm not aware of what the government's mindset was when they said that.
Well, you were in discussions with them. You were talking about the concerns. Yet you stood with them and signed off. So you must have had concerns around that target. They did mislead Victorians, didn't they?
No, I'm not going to say they misled. I don't know what their intent was, but certainly from our perspective, the target was part of a broader package to say we need to accept that we need to increase the housing supply.
But that could never be met. Could never be met.
Well, if you want to be defeatist, but look...
No, I'm not defeatist, I'm a realist.
We've always been very frank.
And you've misled, you and the government have misled the ambitious target. I would contest.
No,
Given
with
you
the
stood
utmost
with government and
respect,
said 800,000 homes can be built. They can't.
Well, at this stage, unfortunately, with the way things have gone, it's looking like 800,000 in the 10-year set won't be
You're lucky
reached.
to get to 60.
You mean
We
per
had
year?
60,000 last year.
Well, look, we may get better, sorry.
So, clearly our position is that unless something changes, we are going to continue to drag in terms of delivery. So these amendments that are being put
That statement was
forward,
18 months ago.
which is the purpose of this inquiry, is to look at initiatives, policy changes that will help mobilise supply. So
But that statement was 18 months ago, not yesterday.
there is a process, as everybody in this room knows,
So
for
don't blame
delivering
the inquiry then.
legislative change. Everybody understands that. It is
Don't
not
blame the
something
inquiry.
you do literally overnight. This has been a program of work to bring forward changes to the planning scheme to enable the sector to deliver to these targets.
Well, don't
Okay,
blame the inquiry.
we're going to
Say,
move
let's
on.
go.
Thank you. Ms Watts, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question particular to VC267 and the Townhouse Code. I am not defeatist about our ambition to build more homes for more Victorians, but doing some reflection on the code before us, I'm interested to know if you have any industry perspectives on how the change of the old res code standards to what we've got now, what will we see in terms of time savings with developments? Does anyone
I
have
can
any
absolutely
reflections on
speak
that,
to that.
or
Yeah, on
any
average,
research that's been done?
Yeah, and this is obviously across a wide variety of municipalities.
Yeah.
Our dual occupancy permits on average take over 12 months, and this would obviously be a lot quicker. Our products already comply under the proposed changes, so we've got product that would be ready to put into market that is compliant with what's proposed. So it'd be at least 6 months saving in time.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a cost associated with that, but I think, and we've spoken about it, the certainty around the outcome is actually as important, if not more, to get Victorians building and investing in housing again.
I'm interested, because we are hearing a lot about councils throughout the inquiry. Do you have any perspectives on what the impact of allowing council discretion when assisting applications for housing projects,
Yeah.
what that actually delivers with respect to confidence and supply?
Absolutely. I mean, if I ask this committee, as an example, what your view is on neighbourhood character,
Yes.
everyone would have a different view. And then that just provides uncertainty, obviously. And I'm not a planner, so I'm probably crossing over Michael's space here, but I know the applications that we deal with, it's the grey areas and the inconsistent application of the planning scheme across different municipalities that causes the problem. So once again, the certainty around having a product that you can put to market and know you can deliver, and we talk about prefabrication of housing. This standardisation actually allows us to talk about that. At the moment, we've got one floor plan that we manipulate 15 different times for 15 different municipalities. How can we possibly manufacture?
What sort of additional costs really then are borne by developers and ultimately reflected in the housing prices of having different councils have their own approach to assessing small-scale housing projects?
I could easily provide some feasibilities. I think the bigger issue that we're dealing with this change is do they proceed or not? So
that baseline question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there's absolutely a cost involved, and I'm happy to provide some examples of that. But you're talking tens of thousands of dollars by the time you take into account holding costs, changes to the design through council, and obviously if you go to VCAT, once again time and legal costs associated with that.
And I think to your earlier point, Oscar, that generally speaking in Melbourne, the people who are developing townhouses and dual occs are not large development companies.
Like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They're small businesses or mum and dad investors.
Just then, with respect to that, I wanted to go to third-party appeals, and what I'm hearing anecdotally at least is that appeals are more common in areas of higher socioeconomic circumstances. Do you believe that third-party appeals are being used in a way to minimise the number and types of people moving into an area?
I might refer to the planner on that one.
But I'm happy to, whoever those
I could
on the panel
perhaps
think
give you
appropriate.
experience over many years, nearly more than 20 years of seeking planning permit approvals. There is no doubt that VCAT and third-party appeals are used in a as a tactic to delay or to frustrate, the outcome of a planning permit application, and some of those delays are, upwards of 18 to 24 months. And clearly that has an impact on the cost and the feasibility.
And on particular areas, is there more?
Well, traditionally, most of those applications have been in inner ring suburbs, because that's where the market demand has been for those type of dwellings previously. So I don't know that the correlation necessarily is as you suggested, but historically it has certainly been more in activity centres of some sort of economic.
So, at an LGA level, we have seen the growth in some LGAs far outstripped others. When I think about our previous witness, we had in the hundreds of percent in, say, Melton and Wyndham, and then
I think if you
28% or something
I
in
don't know the
Bayside. So there
stats.
is clearly.
But if you went to Werribee
challenges.
and saw how many VCAT applications there were compared to Stonington, I think it
Yes.
would be quite a different
Yeah.
balance.
I appreciate that. I was going to ask, do you see some suburbs and some areas of Victoria facing less challenges to having development approved?
Our experience has been that the greenfields and the outer ring suburbs are generally more supportive and open to growth and development, and so there seems to be, through the current system, less resistance. That's certainly not the case in the inner and the middle ring suburbs.
I just wouldn't mind linking the growth area zoning and the ability to use the small lot housing code from a builder's perspective.
Yes, please.
That is exactly why we can build houses so affordably out there, because of the repeatability of what we do and the reliance upon certainty.
Having to factor in
essentially
potential challenges.
This is bringing that code into the majority of Melbourne, and the missing middle hasn't been contributing, and this would definitely help.
I appreciate that. That's all my time, Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Watts. Mrs McArthur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, team, for appearing. Ms Evans, did you have any conversations with Minister Kilkenny prior to this inquiry?
No, not with the Minister.
With Natalie Reiter from the department?
I did on the 7th of March to wish her well in her new role.
Stuart Mosley from the Victorian Planning Authority?
I have met with him in relation to building reform matters.
Jerome Weimer, Commander Weimer from the Department of Transport and Planning?
Another failure for him.
Not spoken to him for several months now.
And which major developers would you have, given, listened to, for instance, Mirvac, Lend-Lease, Frasers?
There are representatives from all of those businesses on the Property Council's Division Council.
And what extra attention did they get in your proposal to support these amendments?
As I said in my earlier statement that on this matter, that all submissions that the Property Council provides to government or other entities are circulated to Division Council members prior to being made available.
Can you provide the reports that they provided to you to give to government?
Absolutely.
Great.
They're publicly available. Most of them are on our website.
Good.
They all are.
And I want to go to infrastructure contributions now, Ms Evans. Building houses is one thing, but having infrastructure to service these communities is absolutely another. So similar to your consultations, somewhat secret, with government on the activity centres, are you aware of any consultations underway regarding reforms to developer infrastructure contributions?
So I would have to take that question on notice.
Why? You surely must know one way or the other.
I have to evaluate my obligations in relation to answering that question.
So you will provide us with a detailed answer on your discussions with government over developer infrastructure contributions, your position.
As I said, I would have to take that question on notice.
Will you be giving us the information about what conversations you had in regard to that?
I will be giving you information as to whether or not I can share information with you.
So you can confirm that you had discussions concerning developer infrastructure contributions?
I'm not confirming nor denying for the purpose
Well,
of
we'll
this
take that
answer
as
right now.
Proposing to withhold information.
Yes, you're not proposing to withhold information from this committee, are you?
I have to evaluate my legal obligation before answering
This is a
that
parliamentary
question.
inquiry.
You're under oath here.
You can provide evidence here. No evidence here is reviewable in a
Parliamentary
court of
privilege.
law.
You've got privilege. You've got privilege.
You can answer the questions
Just be
here.
truthful.
I think, to be fair, it's a bit unreasonable to expect her to answer the question without having proper advice as to her rights. And I would take the same stance.
Okay.
Her rights.
What about
Moving on.
Victorians?
So you've detailed in your submission, Ms Evans, that high interest rates caused largely by federal and state government expenditure at a rapid rate, rising construction costs
That's
caused
not-
largely
Verbally there.
largely by
That's not set out in our
these
our
are
proposal.
the aspects that you said are contributing to the fact that housing is
It
not
wasn't
being
linked
built.
to government infrastructure
Well,
expenditure.
we know how high interest
So I
rates
did not state that
emerge,
in my
don't we?
proposal.
What?
So I did not link
So-
those two issues together
Okay, well,
in
we've
my
got
proposal.
high construction costs, which are hugely a result of the CMFEU in this state and the government's big build projects, which are absolutely out of control, over budget and everywhere. Absolutely exponentially adding to the cost of construction, let alone the shortage of supplies. Excessive red tape you've mentioned. There is massive, not only red tape, green tape, but there's also cultural heritage assessments, which are really an issue for many developments, aren't they, Ms Evans?
There are many impediments to the delivery
Cultural
of housing
heritage
supply,
assessments being one major
which
one?
relate
Ms.
to
MacArthur,
a multitude
I appreciate
of
you've got some
referral
advocacy. We'll just,
agencies.
hang on a second. If you want to ask a question, that's cool.
I've just asked it.
I think you need to let the witness answer the question, okay?
I've asked
Okay,
it.
please, continue.
There are a number of impediments to the delivery of housing supply by a range of entities which are involved in the planning process before a planning application is shovel-ready, as is said. Those inefficiencies across the system relate to many entities for which we have set out in various forums and submissions to government to be addressed.
Yeah, so we know that many developments have been approved by councils. Councils are not holding up developments, but they're not going ahead because of these costs. There's no way they can go to market. Is that not the case, Mr Stanley?
Costs are absolutely part of the problem, which comes to tax and all sorts of inputs into the process, but time is one of them and certainty is certainly another. So I feel like what's put on the table helps deal with that.
Yeah, so there are thousands and thousands of houses been approved but not going ahead because nobody could provide a market for them.
All right, well, we might stop it there. I think that was a rhetorical question, I suspect.
Mr Stanley can answer.
Mr Berger,
He's
please.
capable.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your appearance today. Linda, I wonder if I could direct this to you, and it's in relation to the impact of the urban sprawl. Do you see that as one of the broader challenges that we're facing right at the moment?
I think that there is a little bit of a debunking of the concept of urban sprawl, if I may. There is a set urban growth boundary around metropolitan Melbourne that is enshrined in legislation, and there is no indication that that is likely to move in the short, medium, or long term. We know that there is a very strong proportion of the Victorian community who want to live in a detached home or semi-detached home in the newer communities of metropolitan Melbourne and also in regional Victoria. So our overarching policy around housing supply is that we need supply in the various markets that the industry can deliver, whether it's in the greenfield context, whether it's medium density in our established areas, or if it's more intense development in activity centres.
So do you agree with the 70-30 split?
Our policy is we support the 70-30 split, noting that that has actually been government policy for some time, decades, and it has yet to be actually realised in Melbourne. I think there's a number of reasons for that. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to housing choice, and we want to facilitate the delivery of housing in the type of housing that people want and in the locations that they want to. So for people who want to live in established Melbourne, who are currently locked out of being able to do that, we want to see policy measures that address that. But we also see that 30% of overall housing supply is a significant number, and we also wish to see policies that support and facilitate that.
So what our cities and towns look like if we, we'll end up, if we don't deal with the urban sprawl?
I'm not sure I understand your question about dealing with urban sprawl.
So if
in
we keep
particular.
expanding, what's the cities and the towns going to look like if we just keep going out?
Well, the idea that we can go out indefinitely is not possible. As I said, there's an urban growth boundary. There is obviously the need to make sure that our newer communities in Victoria have the infrastructure provision that is necessary, and we all know examples of where that has not happened. And I would put to you that trunk infrastructure delivery is the responsible of state government. The development industry provides considerable contributions to infrastructure, but it is the state's responsibility to deliver trunk infrastructure such as major road duplications, schools, other facilities. I don't know if
where the windfall gains tax should go, isn't it?
Thank Mrs. MacArthur. I think it's my question, not yours.
Helping you, Mr. Berry.
Well, you're not very helpful at all at the moment. So do you think the reforms encourage more homes to be developed, in the city areas where there's developed infrastructure?
These reforms in particular that we're talking about. I think to the earlier conversations, they will help. There has been, obvious analysis of the need to improve planning red tape. So yes, we see them as part of the picture, but to earlier comments, without the right tax environment, particularly for Victoria, it's going to be extremely difficult to see feasibility improving in the short term. And I note that the number and the increasing volume of and cost of tax in Victoria is an extreme detriment to brand Victoria, if you like, as Victoria as an investment destination for property, and we certainly would like to see considerable reform in tax.
But doesn't it follow if there's certainty in planning and things of that nature, there's a lot more confidence in wanting to do more building in Victoria?
It certainly has a big impact on confidence, and I think that goes again to Oscar's examples around the type of people who are looking to access particularly townhouse and medium density development. Confidence is really important. Confidence for investors is important, and consumer confidence. They're currently two missing pieces of the housing affordability puzzle.
And then that would encourage more diverse housing?
That's what we would hope to achieve, yes.
Oscar, I see you're nodding there. Have you got an opinion on it?
Absolutely. I think the types of products that we'd look to deliver under this code certainly are diverse and very different to what those middle ring suburbs currently look like. We're taking an old 70s home and turning it into two new homes that are way more sustainable, affordable and livable. So I just feel as though if we get the Melbourne economy supporting that and not relying on government to deliver affordable homes, we should be letting the industry take its share of the burden, because at the moment it's very difficult for us to operate in these suburbs under the current complex systems.
Well, I think I've got 12 seconds left. I suppose, Michael, in terms of planning, what's your view on the diverse housings?
Well, these provisions firstly provide a clear standard around housing diversity once developments reach a certain size, which is something that provides very clear direction and guidance. But they also provide the opportunity, it's a pathway, a deemed to comply pathway in these standards that you don't have to take. But if you choose to take it, there are benefits to it. And those benefits are that if you meet those provisions, you can provide a greater diversity of housing that otherwise may not have been in the favour of those around the site, in particular. So by providing that option to an applicant, it does allow flexibility and greater opportunity for housing diversity to be provided.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. We've got about a bit under 10 minutes, so we'll do some quick rapid-fire questions and we'll share that around. I might just start off. Ms. Allison, you made a comment about non-housing growth and infrastructure in one of your early questions way back when.
Struggle.
I think that might have actually been Cath's Property Council.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see how
Non-housing type, but
I
please,
guess,
sorry.
Well, this is, I'm going to be a wild and crazy dude and talk about the planning scheme amendments that are the terms of reference, but do the suite of planning amendments that are before us adequately provide, particularly I suppose for social infrastructure and public open space? Because it seems like there's a lot of stuff about what we're building and such like on a lot-by-lot basis, but perhaps not so much in terms of what happens when we want to do place making and place management.
I might defer to our planning experts if I'm
Sure.
able to.
Yes, absolutely.
So in the aspects of the activity centres, I'm making the assumption that you're referring to with public open space, because public open space contributions are obviously form part of the subdivision process when it comes in particular to the townhouse provisions. So they'll apply to existing urban areas where open space is already in place. However, the subdivision and any subdivision of greater than 2 lots is required to provide a contribution that will be provided to the relevant local authority to further invest in future public open space or enhancements of existing open space. In other examples of the activity centres, in particular those activity centres that applied existing strategic work that had been done by councils, there is explicit provision for open space within those activity centres that have been identified.
Thank you. Perhaps just a quick one. Ms Evans, you referred to consultation with government about activity centres. I take it that would have been in the context of the newly proclaimed...
The 10 pilot.
The 10 pilots. This is some time ago.
Yes,
Okay.
so
All right.
when the draft planning scheme amendments were put out, we provided a formal response to that, which is part of our submission to you today.
Okay, so that's
We
not the actual
gave you a
local
copy
area
of-
schedules that we've just been...
No,
just been put in.
no.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms Crozier.
Thank you, Chair. Could I follow on from Mr Ettershank's question? In your submission, the Property Council submission on draft activity centre plans, you say a flexible approach to managing residential outcomes is vital for ensuring that development is appropriate and sensitive to the local context. Further detail is needed on how the proposed changes will address place-based constraints and opportunities. For example, will there be mechanisms in place to allow for adjustments in built form controls based on heritage considerations, environmental factors or community preferences? Additionally, how will infrastructure capacity such as transport networks and utilities influence decisions about residential density and built form outcomes in catchment areas? These critical questions must be addressed to ensure that the proposed changes lead to successful and sustainable outcomes. So given your answer to Mr Ettershank, can I ask, do you believe those critical questions have been addressed?
So the Property Council has not been involved in the community consultation process to develop
But this is to
site-specific-
government.
That's right. So
And do
we
you,
would have
do you believe the
expected-
government has done that?
So I can't answer that question because I have not been, the Property Council has not been involved in the community consultation process as it relates to specific areas to take into consideration those factors that we have raised. We have simply put it out there to say these are issues that
Sure.
need to be addressed at a local level
Thank
with
you.
the designated activity centres.
Thank you, and that's exactly why this committee is going ahead, because they haven't been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Ms Watts.
Thank you. I wanted to go back again to VC267 and about apartments with a particular interest in sustainability and solar uptake. As you know, Victoria has some very ambitious targets when it comes to our renewable energy uptake across the state, and there are some changes that have been included in the in VC267 with respect to enabling more solar. Is there any Can you talk to me about the interest and enthusiasm of developers about solar-ready and solar-enabled developments? Is there significant demand for this? Is this something that consumers are after? I'm just wanting to know if that's something
from an apartment point of view.
From apartments,
Yep.
and I'm talking particularly,
So,
the medium
look,
medium density.
Environmental performance and environmental initiatives are one of the elements that people consider when they look to purchase an apartment. It's not a massive driver for their decision, more so it's price point and location and size of the apartment. But most developers would naturally look to take the opportunity to install environmental initiatives such as solar panels
Yes.
on common area rooftops, and generally those solar panels feed back into the common area circuits, so the hallways and the lobbies and the car parks.
Lighting and security.
So I would say that that's a common feature of new apartment developments, has been for probably the last, in my experience, 10 years.
If I may, it's probably
Yes,
also
please.
driven to a large extent by the National Construction Code and the requirements in that for greater energy efficiency. They probably have more influence on what's being built than necessarily consumer demand just for environmental reasons.
Okay.
But that's probably important as well. But ultimately, the National Construction Code, which is part of the building regulation system, already has quite tightening requirements, arguably too tight in cases, to have meet environmental efficiency requirements, energy efficiency,
Yeah.
and they probably have more to do with what's being built at the moment in
I
that
can
area.
support that. 100% of our homes post the changes have solar as standard.
Solar as standard.
Certainly not driven by customer demand. In the affordable space, it's just not a priority, is the reality.
So in the affordable end of the market.
Yeah, first home buyers, we've offered solar for years as an upgrade selection, and less than 5% choose it. But the changes to NCC going to 7-star, we're putting it on 100% of homes, and that would be what's delivered here.
Yes, that's what I was hoping to get to. Thank you very much.
All right, I think that's a wrap. So, firstly, thank you very much to all of you for coming along, for your thoughtful presentations and submissions, and obviously making time to see us on very short notice, so that is genuinely appreciated. You'll receive a copy of the transcript from today's proceedings for review shortly, before it is being published on our website. The committee will now take a break. We'll return at 3:10, and thank you to everyone.
Chair, we'd also note that there were questions taken on notice. They would need to be provided to us very quickly because we're deliberating this almost this week.
Yeah.
So,
So if you could, within the next 48 hours, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.